So today we're going to work with Sqlite Databases. This is our first one because today is all about data, as I mentioned before. Sqlite is probably, and people go, oh my god, databases? It's really easy. In fact, it's easier than working with text files, and it's easier than working with core data. Core data is actually the hardest. So we'll go to databases, then we'll do the text files, then we'll go to core data. So we'll do the easiest one first. And you're wondering, I don't know anything about databases. You don't actually have to. So Sqlite is on the devices. The core operating system on the iOS has a database. When you log into a database and you create a database, it's just for your app. It doesn't work with any other app on the phone, actually. It's solo your app environment, which means you can't create a database and then use it with multiple apps. It doesn't work that way. It's a single, and it's a light version, which means doesn't take up as much memory. It's on the phone whether you use it or not, and a lot of apps have that facility and they use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to design an application to store an address book. And it's going to have a contact information, name, address, telephone numbers, and we're going to store that information in an Sqlite database. So if you don't worry about SQL, if you don't know anything about how to run a query, I've written the queries for you, but I'll talk about the queries a little bit. So in addition to the data storage, we're going to also have a feature that's going to be implemented to allow the user to search the database. So we're going to do a select on the database to find something that's going to be in a text field, essentially, that the user is going to type in there. And some knowledge of SQL and SQL-like concept is assumed. So this is definitely created for computer science students or for people who've had a database class. However, I will try to explain some of the database concepts as we go through, but this is not a replacement for a full database lecture. So we're going to create a single view application, and if you remember what I said last time, we don't get to pick storyboard anymore, we get it automatically. So we'll be picking the storyboard option, and we don't have any option for enabling ARC, but if you do have the option, enable it. Otherwise, you're not going to see the option, so don't worry about it. And let's call this one, there's no name in here. We just call it anything we want. How about that? So I'm going to go and I'm going to click on Xcode. And, I still have SuperCalc from last week. Create a new project. And it's going to be a single view application. So it's a single view application up here in the right hand corner. And click on Next. And what am I going to call this? How about I'm going to call it my database. And when I'm all done, I'll post this project underneath the video so anyone who was not able to complete it to its entirety can have this fresh version of it. I'm going to create it for the iPhone because I want to make my life simple. So I'm going to select iPhone here. Most of the tutorials I'll create for iPhone because you can run iPhone on iPad. You just can't go iPad to iPhone. It doesn't work. So if you're going to pick one, you might as well just pick iPhone. Plus the emulator is smaller. It fits on my screen a little bit better. So anyway, iPhone. Go ahead and click on Next and go ahead and save it. I'm going to save mine to my desktop. And now I have my application. So I'm sitting here going, okay, now what do I do? Well, we're going to build our UI first, but let's go through the motions here. Once the project has been created, the next step is where we're going to configure the project to include the Sqlite dynamic library. So now we're going to add a library to the app because it doesn't already come with it by default, and we're going to see how the libraries are included in a few minutes. And we're going to do this with Facebook as we go further down the road. And I think we have a Twitter one and we have a couple of other ones. All these third-party libraries and built-in libraries all get added the same way. So now today you're going to see how libraries get put in. We're going to have to put one in for lib Sqlite 3. So, and it might be, I think it's probably still on 3, but we'll see in a few minutes. So during the link phase of the build process, the library gets linked in. It's kind of like doing include stdio or something, one of the built-in libraries of a programming language. Failure to include the library is going to give you some build errors. So to add the library, we're going to select the target entry in the Xcode project navigator. That's going to be on the top of the product name. And to display the summary information panel that we're going to see, well, what does that mean? Click right here. Click, this is the project name over here in the Project Explorer window, and you want to see this in the middle. You get this because we just made the app. If you click somewhere else, you don't have that yet, but we're going to be in here. because we have this thing called build phases and build settings. Click on build phases. Build phases include target dependencies, compiled sources, linked binaries with libraries is what we're going to look at. So I want to make sure I follow my instructions. Select the Build Phases tab. That's the tab we just clicked on. You're going to have the same tab in older versions of Xcode. It's going to be called the same thing. It's just going to be different. It's going to be like in the middle of the screen instead of horizontal. It's going to be down this way instead of like this. But look for Build Phases. And then we want to look at the linked binaries with libraries. Well, that's this one right here. So click on the little arrow to open it up. And you see we have core graphics, and we have UI kit, which is our UI kit, and we have foundation. Foundation is what we need for Objective-C. If you take the Objective-C class, you know that all of the NS, everything comes out of the foundation. UI kit, well, that's the touch events and the mouse clicks and the touch up inside. That's all of the interactive events that happen. And then obviously the core graphics framework is giving us our graphic capability for the windows and for the layouts and stuff that we're using. So now we have to add one in here. So to add the library, we're going to click on the little plus, and it's the smallest little thing you've ever seen on the smallest little corner of this window where there's a little plus down here. And when we click on the plus button, it's going to display a full list. We want to select libsqlite 3. So let's just click on the little plus. A little help here. I'm going to actually type in lib, and then I'm going to type in SQL, and I'm going to say, oh, we're still on Lite 3. So I see two of them. I see 3.0 and I see 3. I think I'm going to want just the regular old 3, which is the older one. Yeah, it's the regular old 3 we want. It's 2 libraries. It's going to have 2 separate implementations. Make sure you click on the one that says no O, just the regular one that says 3. Why they put it in there twice, don't know. Do you not have it? Everybody find this one?
Yes.
Click on Add. Now you see it in the window. And it looks a little different. It has a little separate little icon next to it. So it's not too bad. When we do this, we can now include, so let's import SQL3Lite and declare the database references that we're going to use inside. So what we're going to do is use this SQLite 3.h. If you put the other one in there, you got to use 3.0.h. And the dots, just use the regular one here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is flip back to the project, and let's take a look here. Make this full screen now. So before we create a database, we're going to need to declare a variable pointer to a structure of a type. We have to create basically a database pointer to say we're going to use this database resource. And it's going to act as a reference to our database. So it's going to be in the Viewcontroller.h file because we're going to use it through our Viewcontroller. So since we're working with the database in the Viewcontroller, our application, the best place to declare the variable is going to be in our Viewcontroller.h. There's a lot of extra wording on here because this is a little bit more difficult in concept than some of the other tutorials. So since we also need to import the header file into any other files where we're going to be using the SQLite database, it's also an ideal place to include the file itself. So we'll include it at the top. And now it's also a good time to declare the NSString property in which to store the path of the database that we're going to use. I'm going to give you all the code in a few minutes. And then within the Xcode project, we're going to select, to get us started here, select Viewcontroller.h. So the first thing you're going to want to do is add the import to the top of the Viewcontroller.h file. As I mentioned before, right underneath, see, now you might understand where this library is coming from. We have UI kit. We just saw that in the include libraries a few minutes ago. Now we just added SQLite 3. We don't have to put foundation in there, but a lot of people do put foundation in there. We don't need that. It's just in there by default. Actually, it's in the core. It's in the app delegate as well. So, so you click on Viewcontroller.h, and we imported now SQLite 3, which is that new library that we're going to use. That's going to have us connect to a database. All right. So now we're going to add the following 2 parameters to the same file. So last week we made properties of labels. made properties of buttons. We did all sorts of properties of GUI components. We're going to create 2 properties of strings that we're going to use. I would just copy and paste from the PDF file and stick them in here. In between the @ interface and the @ end, these properties are not associated with GUI components. Instead, we're going to create, and forget about all this purple stuff all the way up to here, and a string. It's a variable, and the string's going to be called database path. We're going to keep the path to the database in the string, so we don't have to keep writing it over and over again. And the other variable that we created was an instance of an SQLite 3 object. This is why we had to put the include file up here for SQLite 3. So we're making an instance of the object. The object's going to be called contact database. And so we connect to the object via this database path that we're going to set. So those are our 2 variables. We made them into properties so that we can synthesize them to get the automatic setters and the getters. We don't actually have to do that. Don't do this. Don't do this. But you could have done it this way. Do not do this. Yeah, let's see. And then, you know, the other one in here, SQLite 3, and then could have done it this way. We just made 2 variables. We declared 2 variables that are going to be data members of this particular object of the view controller. If we do them this way, we automatically get setters and getters when we synthesize. So it automates the work for us. So without teaching you too much about Objective-C, I just kind of wanted to make that clear. So now the finished file looks like this. So it's not too bad. You guys are wondering, well, where's the hard part going to come? It's not going to. So now we need to design the user interface. So if yours doesn't look like this, just copy and paste this, stick it inside of the viewcontroller.h file, and replace what's there. So and that should work for you. We're not adding anything else. This is your finished product. This is what it looks like. So now we're going to click on this storyboard and do the fun stuff with the user interface. So I've got my iPad storyboard up here, and we're going to select the storyboard file, and then we're going to edit the user interface. We're going to drag and drop some components to it from the object library, view utilities object library, okay, onto the canvas, and then edit the properties and the layout shown below. All right, here's our fantastic user interface. Let's see if there's anything below it. Nope, there's nothing below it. Let's build this. Hopefully you have the file downloaded, because I have to move it aside a little bit on my computer to kind of, I have to go back and forth, so hopefully you have this file downloaded. So now you don't have to go green, anything you want. You don't have to put database example. You could put my fabulous contact list or something there. But name, address, and phone number. This label's going to hold the find results. It's going to say, here, found, not found, stuff like that. I put the word label on here so that you would see that there is a label there. You could take the word label off and leave it blank if you'd like. Or you could leave it and let it say label, and then when we start it, we'll just set it to an empty string. So have at it. I no longer have to tell you. You should be able to drag and drop at this point. So go ahead and build the interface. Let's see if I could do it. Label. We're going to have 2 labels. You can build this any way you want. I'm going to start with the labels. And this one's going to say, my fabulous address book. I was going to say, I already have a computer coming up here. That's quick. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I have to make my background green because that's what I do. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to get away at mine because I don't like that. Doesn't take up space here. Let's see. All right, there we go. Fabulous address book. What else I got? I got name, address, phone number, and another label. So I got a name. And then I got an address. I'm going to have a phone number. And I'm going to have a label down here. It's going to show my output. I'll just let that say label on it. And then I'm going to line up my components so they look good. And then I'm going to have to put some text boxes in there too. It looks like 3 of them. So let's see. Text. Here, oh. Edit text. Oh, let's just go text. There we go. So I got 1. Now mine's gonna look a little bit different because my buttons aren't gonna look like the old style buttons in the screenshot. They're gonna look like the iOS 7 buttons. So let's see. See how these little ruler lines are helping? You probably can't. Hey, you can see the ruler lines. The ruler lines are helping me kind of set stuff up. Yeah, not a bad idea. Makes things look bigger. You know, when your label, make your label big too, because your label's going to hold information from your query that we're going to run, and you want to make sure the output is able to be shown. And I'm going to make that centered. There we go. And I'm going to put some buttons on the screen. 2 buttons. And my buttons are going to say save and find. So let me save. I'm slowly getting used to this iOS 7 look. Find. There we go. Alright. Let's see if I forgot anything. No. I think I'm pretty good here. Are you guys still working or are you done? Working? Okay, let me pause this for a second. So while you guys are finishing up, I want to explain something about what we did over here. That shouldn't give you an error message.
It shows in Sqlite.
Oh, you can't put strong here. This one stays at non-atomic. They're both non-atomic. I suspect, now don't quote me on this one, but I suspect the next release, this will be gone completely because everything is non-atomic anyway. And we'll get rid of the strong and the weak because we don't need it anymore. It doesn't do anything because we don't have any more ARC. So what this means, for those people who are curious, what this part here means is what I'm trying to say is this is going to go away. It really doesn't mean anything anymore. In the old days, strong meant don't garbage collect me, keep me around for the entire program. This is back when we used to do our own garbage collection. We were marking things and unmarking things as, and if you put weak in there, it meant it could be garbage collected. It wasn't going to hang out past the scope. So strong just said, keep me from being garbage collected. And then the non-atomic, well, that's everything is non-atomic right now. We don't have any other form of that. In the old days, there was different forms of it. So, long story short, this means absolutely nothing. If strong didn't work, there's an interesting phenomena going on your computer. Strong work for everybody else? Strong normally works. Let me take a look. Actually, let me go over and take a look at your settings and what version of the compiler you have. If you have a previous compiler, that might be the issue. If you haven't selected ARC on a previous version of Xcode, that might be the issue. On the current version of Xcode, you don't get a choice anymore and it doesn't work anymore. It's not even read. However, the syntax is still the same. So they haven't quite, they took parts, throughout the years they've been taking parts of it out. They left this in, they need to take it out. Long story short, you don't have any more options anymore, so why have the user select an option? Which doesn't make any sense. So let me go over and take a look at yours actually. The save and find are buttons, but they look like this. Whoops, where'd my buttons go? Lost my buttons. They look like this in the iOS 7. If you go back a few iOS versions, it might look like this. Maybe not. This is an old screenshot. Alright, we're going to move forward. Alright, so before proceeding, we're going to need to stretch the label back. Okay, so make sure your label's big above the 2 buttons so it covers the width, the entire width of the view. Center it. Make sure remove the word label so that it's blank if you want. I'm going to leave mine on as label so I can find it where it's at. Alright, so next we're going to wire the components to the Viewcontroller.h file. This is the same format I normally use. So we're going to select that little tuxedo icon, and we're going to bring up the Viewcontroller.h. So if you have this guy over here, select on the tuxedo icon up here. Did I resume this? Yes, I did. Okay, good. And I'm going to get rid of my side panel, make it a little bit easier. Now, the name, address, phone number, we don't have to do anything with. We don't actually have to do anything with the fabulous address book title either. But we are going to be interested in this label, and we do have these 3 text boxes that we're going to be working with. So let's see. Make sure you're in the Viewcontroller. So here's where people had problems last time, and I will tell you that Xcode has a bug. Xcode has more than one bug, but the one bug that causes most problem for me as a teacher is when students wire stuff over and then they change stuff over here. Take it very slowly. Don't rush through this next step. When you drag, you're stuck with it forever. Don't change the label. If you selected ID, leave it on ID. If you mistyped the label, leave it mistyped. Because the bug is the temporary cache. Some people had this problem last time. They started changing stuff. When you put it here, it automatically updates a couple of other things elsewhere. And you change it here, it doesn't update anything elsewhere. So it should, it's supposed to, but the timing is a little off. It's buggy. So it's better just to take it slow, make sure you put the right label in there before you press OK. Okay, just keep that in mind, and you'll never have a problem. That's why mine always compile and back there, hey, it's not working. I did the same thing. It's like, no, you didn't. You changed it. Don't change anything. All right, so we're going to right now, let's click on the text field object and drag it to the position just underneath the at interface line. Okay, this is an old tutorial, so there's a lot of steps in here that we already know about. We're going to call the name field, this is the text field. We're going to call it the name. Let's just preview what we're going to do first. Then we have the address, and then we have the phone number, and then we have the status. And they're all going to be properties, which means they're going to get dragged without the right mouse click and without the label, without the menu. They're just dragged over as properties. So this one here, this is the important part. The name, the address, the phone, and the status. This is the name. So in my viewcontroller.h file, I'm on my M. I have to switch over. Make sure you're in the viewcontroller.h file as well. If you drag over to the M, you have another bug in Xcode that's going to mess you up completely. Just delete the project and start over if you do that. So I'm in the .h. I'm going to drag over this one. I'm pressing the control button. I'm dragging over. I'm going to create a property. This one's going to be called the name. The name. Leave it on UI text field. Press connect. And now you see we have the same thing as we had up here, except for now we have a weak one. It doesn't really matter, just leave it alone. Do the same thing with the address. Control drag it over. The address. You can call it anything you want. If you call it the name, the address, the phone, it will match the other code that you will paste in later. So control it over. The phone. Make sure you type it correctly. Press OK. Was that a yawn or a stretch, or was that a?
Yes.
Okay. No. I just didn't know if you needed help. Hard to tell the yawns or the stretches from the. We have been able to successfully drag those over. All right. We're also going to have the output, but let's see the status. This one's going to be called the status. So take the label, drag that one over underneath it, call this one the status. Status. S-T-A-T. Okay, there we go. And that one's a UI label. The reason why I don't use ID.
The storage is weak?
Yeah. Just leave it on whatever it is by default. Storage is weak on all of them, non-atomic on everything. It's going to say property in the beginning. And you're going to have UI text field, UI text field, UI text field, UI label. This is the reason why, otherwise it would say ID, 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 ID. And I go, what is the ID? That's why I always change it to whatever it is. Because then I know that this one here is an NS string and this one's SQ. Well, you can't do it with these guys anyway. But over here you could tell that these are text fields and this one's a UI label. Are we good so far? Okay, good. All right, moving right along. We got the two buttons. And we know the buttons are going to have actions associated with them. We're going to have one action that's going to be a save data. The other one's going to be find contact. So we're going to control click and save the button object. And let's see, there's our status. We're going to make two IB actions out of it. So control click and save the button, save button object, and save the line in the area immediately underneath it. Assistant, release the line. Establish the action. No, I don't like those instructions. I'm just going to tell you how to do it. Right mouse click, pick the touch down inside or touch up inside or touch down event. One's going to be, we're going to make two IB actions. So right mouse click on the save button. Remember, all your buttons are going to have actions. So you want to make an action, not a property, you have to open up this little window here. I'm going to take the touchdown event, drag it over. This one's going to be called SAVE, capital DATA. Save data. Let me just make sure. Save data and find contact is the other one. So I'm going to get rid of that screen. Save data. On the type, you can leave it on ID if you accidentally just press connect. I'm going to change it to UI button. Doesn't matter if it's ID or button, but don't change it. Press connect. I get a save data with a UI button. And then I'm going to do find contact. So I'm going to right mouse click over here. I'm going to control drag this guy over to a find contact. FIND, capital C, contact. Contact. And then I'm changing the type to a UI button. And I just use the touchdown event. So if these say properties on them, you've done the wrong thing. These should say IB action. Are we good or we need more time? One more time? Okay, let me just pause this for a second. So I see some of the people who are farther ahead have put buttons, who have put images here. I'll do it later when I get bored. If you're bored, it says save and find. Save data, or you can put save button. And find contact is the other one. If you're bored at this point, you can put images on your buttons or do something else if you want. Put an image on the background, I don't know. Anyway, let's see. We're going to push forward. Oh, we're going to have attendance. Well, let's do attendance first. It gives people time to catch up as well. So, okay, I'm going to assume everyone is caught up to this point. While we were sort of on attendance break, I put some icons out here. This is my save button and my find button. And I just threw an image view back here. This is the image view is just a plain old image view that I dragged over. That I just decided I want to put some leaves on the bottom. Originally I was going to put it on the background, but I just decided now just put the leaves on the bottom. So the leaves don't really do anything. They're just for graphical, I don't know, just to fill up the space on the bottom of my screen, I guess. So anyway, so let's go back to the tutorial and finish building our contacts. And this is not the tutorial I was looking for. Let's see. Here it is. So the first thing we want to do is synthesize our properties. Now this tutorial is a little bit on the older side. It's made for a previous version of Xcode, and when it says the name is synthesized as the underscore name, I'm not going to do that. Instead, well, we could do that, but because we're going to need to change it in here probably. Yeah, we'll have to take out the underscores down here, but I have to clean up this code anyway. So you could, if you wanted to do it this way, you would put the lines in that look like, hold on one second. I don't have the finished product here. Okay, well, the synthesized lines would use the synthesized with a name, space, and then another name. So if I did for example, the name, let me show you as an example here. I'm switching over to Viewcontroller.m. At the top of the screen, or top of the file, in between the @ implementation and the @ end is where we add our synthesized statements. So if I synthesize the property and I say the name, I can go space with an underscore the name. if I want to. Or I could synthesize, oh no, actually I'm going to need to do it this way with the name. No, actually that's not going to work. It's an old way of doing it. I don't want to do it that way. Let's just leave them out. I don't want to do that. Before in the old days you put an underscore next to the name. I don't think this syntax is actually going to work anymore in this current version. It might work with the older version. Let's just do things the new way. We just synthesize it with the same name as we had before. And I'm going to put them all on one line. So I have the name, I have the address, I have the phone number, I have the status, and name, address, phone number, status. That's about it. That's all I have to synthesize. But I'm also going to want to synthesize those two properties I added myself. One of them was the address of some sort. Let's go back and take a look here, refresh my memory on what those were. We added one that said contact database and one that said a database path. So just so you know, all of the things that we're making properties with, we make synthesize for. It's a one-to-one kind of relationship. If we have a property, we make a synthesize for it. The synthesize gives us our setters and getters. What is that? Get the property, set the property. Built-in functionality for us to communicate with it. Makes it so that we can access it through public member functions that we're going to add here. So we have a database path that I'm going to add in here. And I'm also going to add the other one, which was a contact database. So my finished synthesize line, actually what I'm going to do is get rid of this side piece, and I'm going to put my Viewcontroller.m in the middle here. So your line should look like this line here. So synthesize the name, the address, the phone number, the status, database path, and contact database. I would just do it all in one line. It makes it a little bit easier. Have we gotten that far? So don't follow the instructions on this one. I'm changing the instructions. So we don't need to do it the old way. Okay. After we have synthesized everything, we're pretty much done right now, except for the functionality of the Save button and the Find button. But before we can do anything, we're going to have to create the database and the database tables. The way we're going to do that is when the app starts up, it's going to look for the database. If the database doesn't exist, it needs to create it. So creating the database and database table, when the application is launched, we need to check whether the database is there. If not, we're going to create the database and the database tables that store the data. We're going to do this in the view did load. So the view did load is part of the app lifecycle that says on a load of the view, if it loaded, we're going to continue. If it loaded, then we're going to come over here and we're going to have two things. We're going to check for the documents directory. Documents directory. Each user on the phone has a documents directory, and the apps have access to the document directory. So this is where you hold all of your documents that you're going to use. It's kind of like Windows with the My Documents folder. We're going to use this documents directory or folder to put our database inside of. We're going to create a database object. So the string for the documents directory, and then we have an array for the directory path. So we're going to get the documents directory using a directory path, which is a string. Excuse me, is an NS array. That's going to be equal to NS search path for directories in domains. For us on the phone, it's actually finding our documents directory folder. And then the method call is taking on a couple parameters. One is going to be the NS document directories, which we want from the path. And then we want the NS users domain mask. Who are we? So if I'm logged onto the phone and I'm bhacker, then my domain mask is who I am. It's kind of like the documents and settings folders on Windows, and we have a different My Documents folder inside of all the document settings folder. It's the same concept, but it's on iOS, and it's implemented slightly different way here, but very similar in concept. Now, the path is an array, because we have the home folder, then we have the subfolder, then we have the subfolder until we finally get to the documents folder. So we're going to take the array, and we're going to take the documents directory, which is going to be a string, and have it equal to the first element, which is 0, of the directory path. Just the main outer folder of the documents directory. So then we're going to build the path to the database. So we're creating the path. So the database path, and we're going to have to take out this underscore here. It's going to be equal to an NS string alloc, which means we have to create. If you don't know Objective-C, that's a little bit foreign to you. We have to create a string object, and then we're going to populate the string object. We're going to initialize with a string, and the string we're going to initialize it with is the string by appending path component, and we're going to call it contacts.db. So if you actually went to the SD card of the phone, or if you're able to look at a file manager, and you found your documents folder, you'd see a file called contacts.db. So this is very similar, and when we say SQLite, people think of this client-server database, and this database is out there in the orb, blah, blah, blah. Not really. It's just like Microsoft database. If you've ever worked with Microsoft Access, very similar. It's not an NDB file, MDB, it's a DB file. So it's actual file that's stored in the documents folder of the user and the user's path that's attached to the app that the user has installed, and it's created. So we find the path, we create the file. Once we create the file, which represents our database, then we create the table inside of the file by using a create table command, and then we populate, and then we do a select on it, and we search from it, just like Microsoft Access. So if you're familiar with Access, it's extremely similar in terms of the concept. So the NS file manager will make a new instance and call it a file manager, because we need a file manager object to keep track of where this file is. And then if the file, because we're going to go create the file manager object, see if contacts.db exists. If it does exist, leave it alone. If it doesn't exist, we have to create it. So if we find it and the path is there, then here's our create table if not exist contacts. And we're going to have an ID that's going to be an integer. That's going to be the primary key, auto incremented. And then we're going to have the name, which is going to be text, the address, which is going to be text, and phone, that's going to be text. So if you wanted to add more GUI elements to your interface, then you just change the database to create more stuff to it. So it's a nice little template to grow with. Nice little easy formatted database. So you can probably make a shopping list out of this, a to-do list out of this, whatever you want to do. You just follow the same pattern. Now if there's an error, then you can say that it's failed to create the table. Otherwise, if you can't even get, and the SQLite database won't even open, it's failed to open or create the database. So if you can't open up the database, you can't open up the table, the create table doesn't work. When would that happen? If you ran out of memory on the phone. If the phone didn't have enough memory in it or something, that would probably be a problem. So, okay. So I'm going to take this from right below where it says super view did load. This is the dangerous part because I'm going to have to clean this up. So I'm going to copy it all the way down to the last curly bracket, but not take the last curly bracket, because then I don't have to worry about mismatching my brackets, because I'm going to put this inside of my view did load method that's inside of my project already, that's empty except for this one line. Because if I go to the go here and I look at this is the method I'm modifying, it's the view did load. There's nothing in there except for that one line that says super view did load. So I'm going to take the comment out below it, and I'm going to paste the code in and pray. Let's see. Paste. Now I'm going to have a few problems because of those underscores. So I'm going to just work from the top down, and I'm going to take out this underscore, and then I'm going to come over here and take out this underscore, and then this one too, because I have underscores in front of all of it. When I rewrite this tutorial, I'm going to take out the underscores. Now under here, I've got a create table. Looks like I've got a hard return right in the middle of my SQL statement, so I'm going to take out the hard return. There we go, and make it word wrap correctly, and then take out the contact underscore, and then take out the underscore in front of the status, and then the underscore here, and then the underscore here. And now my my method is pasted correctly. I'm going to pause this for a second and then help you guys. Okay, let's see if we can get through at least this tutorial today. Alright, so if you don't put the synthesized line in up here, The errors are never going to go away down here. In here, we're just removing the underscores next to the names of the variables. And then there was one line return you have to remove here. Okay, so we're back to the database. We have two methods that we have to include the code for. One's going to be the save data, and the other one's going to be the find data. So the code in the above here that we just put in, identifies the application documents directory and constructs a path to the context database file. We've done that part. And then we've created an NS file manager instance, and subsequently it uses it detects the database file if it already exists, so we don't overwrite our database every time we run our app. And if the file doesn't exist, it converts a string and creates, for the database name, and creates an SQLite database using the open command. Prepares an SQL statement to create the context table for the database, reports any success or failure that occurs. So in the next step, we're going to create the code for the saved data. So this is going to take the input that we've put in the text box and write it to the database. So in the save data method here, we're going to have a statement command. So the statement command is going to be the database statement that does an insert for us, or an update. I don't know if we're going to do an update. I think we're probably just going to do an insert, actually. We're going to have a character for the database path that we're going to create, a character constant, and that's going to be, so we're going to have to take out the underscores again when we paste this in. The database, we're going to get the database path. We're going to open up the database. If it's okay, we're going to do something. If it's not okay, we're going to report a problem. So if it's okay, then we're going to insert into contacts, name, address, phone, and then the values are going to be set here. And the values are going to be using this kind of a code sequence that says, and this is called formatted input, and uses like in C programming for printf, it's formatted input. You use the $F, the $D if you're familiar with programming. Same thing with $A. The $A at symbol is for an object. The object we're going to put in is the property object. So it's the self.name, the name.text, the address.text, the phone.text. So whatever is in the text fields that are out there are going to be copied in using an insert into context command. If you're not familiar with SQL, that's going to look like Greek. If you are familiar with SQL, that should look very familiar. It's just a regular old insert. Insert into these fields name, address, and phone. Put the values that are in the self, name text, address text, and phone text. After we do that, then we're going to close the database if it's successful. And then if the statement is done, we come back and the statement actually works. We're going to say that the self.status.text is going to be equal to contact added. Remember that little label that we have on the bottom here that we put in here that says the label or something on it right now? This guy here is going to say contact added. So, and then what we're going to do is clear out everything else, because why are you going to leave it there? Make it all empty. So we set the text for the name, the phone, and the address to a blank string. Else we failed to add the contact. We're going to finalize the statement which closes it, and then we're going to close the database. So we open up the database in the beginning. We get the path, we open up the file, we prepare an SQL statement that has the information included in the text field. So if you leave the text field blank and you say save data, it's all going to be blank. So it's not going to, there's no error checking here. So when you put the data in, you'll have to see. You can always add your error checking if you wanted to. So when you press the button to save data, it checked to see if this self.thename.text is equal to a blank string. If it is, then stop, break, go back to the end, and say, hey, enter a real name or something. So you could add your own error checking to this. So go ahead and copy and paste this into your save data method. So I'm going to go back to my save data method. If you can't get your copying to pasting, this is in Viewcontroller.m, by the way, and you'll notice that save data and find context is already created for you at the bottom of the screen. So if you can't get the work, don't worry about it. I'm going to post this final project for you. But let's see. Oops. I want to paste it in. So I'm going to copy here and paste in here. And when you guys talk, the people around you can't hear anything. When you guys talk, the people around you can't hear me. So if you want to talk, you can actually just go outside. Because some of it doesn't even sound like it's related to the class. So. Now it got quiet. Okay, so I'm copying from the save data method out here, and I'm going to paste it in here. And I'm going to get rid of the underscores again. And I'm going to see what's going on here. I got another underscore here. This one actually looks like it pasted a little bit better. I just get rid of all of the underscores and it looks pretty good. I'm going to leave the spacing the way it is because I don't feel like messing with it right now. But if you get rid of, on this one, if you just get rid of the underscores in front of the variables, the contact, the name, the address, the phone, it should work just fine, actually. And then I'm going to paste the code in for the next one, which is going to be the find. So this one does an SQL insert into contacts. Contacts is the name of our database. So in our next one, we're going to use a find contact command. And the find contact is going to do the same thing as before, but we're going to select. So we're going to run a select command, address phone from contacts where the name is equal to the name in the text box. So you put a name in the text box and you hit the find and it brings up the address and the phone number for you. So we're going to select the address and phone number from contacts because the name's already in the name box. We just have to get the other two pieces. And it's pretty much the same code as before. We're going to check to see if we have an SQLite error, if the database is not there. If the database is there, then we're going to query the database. And then when we query the database, we're going to essentially update the status field to match found or match not found, depending upon the result set that comes back. If we don't get anything back, then on our check here, where it says SQLite underscore row, then if it's null, it's going to come back and say, nope, nothing. Doesn't exist. We can't have it make it equal to anything. So then the else is going to run it. It's going to say match not found. So go ahead and put this code into the find contact method. And in a few minutes when we're almost done with this actually, then I'll come around and help you guys actually. But let's just get this part through for those people who are able to do it. And take out those nasty underscores in front of all the contact database and path names and stuff. And this is going to work the same way. If you just remove the underscores in front of those names, everything works fine. It appears to have pasted just fine. It's just the names changed on us. Oops, let's see. So while you're pasting, I'll talk a little bit more. So remove those underscores and it works. So the source code that we just put in opens up the database, constructs an SQL statement, extracts the records, does a match, extracts any record in the database that matches the name entered by the user, so it's the name that we're using the find on. And then if the SQL row is a statement is then executed, and then if there's a return value that comes back, it indicates at least one match was located. So what happens if we have multiple matches? We're going to get the first match. So if you put the name in, we didn't put a check in there for multiple matches. We only put a check in for one match. So it's going to come back with the first match. So we could test it out in a few minutes and you'll see what I'm talking about. But as an alternative, there's a while loop. You could make a while loop out of that. So this tutorial is open to further enhancements by you. If you want to put checks to make sure that the person has put in a name, address, and a telephone number, you could check for blank properties. You could say, is the name.text equal to a blank string? If it is, don't update the database, go back to the user and say, hey. Or you could put a loop in here, a while loop, that can be found for all of the display matches. So if it's, right now it's only going to find one because there's no loop. If you put a loop in, then it can find all of the people with that name. and then display each one of them. So for the purpose of keeping this simple, we're just going to display the first match. And the code then updates the status label and indicates whether or not the match was found or not. So here's an optional modification that we are going to do, because here's what happens when you run the database. And I'm actually just going to run it right now so you can see what goes on. It's actually functional right now because we have the code in there. But when I open up the text box, like when I type in the text box, this keyboard comes up. And if we can't get rid of the keyboard, which it's not going away on its own, we have issues. I can't use the labels. I can't use the stuff underneath. So we can perform a resign first responder on each one of the text fields. So we can record a done event. Looks like I'm going to need to do this actually because I put the buttons on the bottom. So at this point your interface should load and it should be able to type into the fields, but the keyboard doesn't go away. So let's make the keyboard go away. I'm going to click back on the storyboard. And I'm going to open back up the properties on the right-hand side. And I'm going to take the first, actually let me click on the tuxedo as well. So I've got the viewcontroller.h file open. And I'm going to make sure it's on the viewcontroller.h file. I'm going to take the first text field over in this panel over here. I'm going to take the return key, change it to done. So it signals a done on the return key. So when your user presses the return key on either the return key on the keyboard or the return key on the touchpad, it's done. This is optional. You don't necessarily have to do this, but we'll just change it to done. If they just happen to press the return key, it's a nice behavior to have happen. So I'm going to do it on all three boxes. Done. So then I'm going to close the side panel, and then while the viewcontroller.h file is still open, I'm going to right mouse click on the first text box. I'm going to make one method like we did with the calculator, and I'm going to attach the other three text boxes to the same method. And this method's going to be on the done event. So did end on exit, which is the top guy up here on the top. It says did end on exit. Whoops, where'd it go? Did end on exit. I'm wiring it over here, and I'm going to call it finished. Call it anything you want. I'm going to call it finished, or it's like the done button or something, or the done or finished. I'm saying finished. I'm going to leave it on ID, makes it generic. If you want, you could change it to UI text field. They're all UI text fields, so it doesn't matter. But I'm making a generic method that I'm going to use on a bunch of other things. So, actually, I'll put it on UI text field. It doesn't really matter what it's on. Press connect.
What is the thing that you just attached to the done button?
So I'm going to do, I'll show you this one. So if I right mouse click on the next text box, on the top where it says did end on exit, it's kind of small from where you're sitting probably, but it says did end on exit. It's the first item in the list. This is what you guys are going to do as well. On the second one, take this button over here, drag it to the finished. So it's also connected to the finished button. It's the same thing we would do with the calculator last week with the numbers and the operators. We're going to take all, because I have three different did end on exit methods. We'll just take one method and attach it to all three of those text boxes. So now I have the second one done. This says up here, it says did end on exit. This is the one we're wiring. And then I'm going to take this one here, right mouse click, do the same thing. So now it's wired to finished. The way I got that originally is I just wired it the same way as you wired this save data and the finished contact.
But this finished is
These are IB actions. These are the two buttons. The save data and the finished, or find data, find contact, are two buttons.
But the thing is that you are using is on top of it is the finished.
Yeah, this was the IB action I created on the first text box. So I took the first text box, and I'll just do another one here. I'll just do the touchdown event, and I dragged it over, and I let go, and I called it finished.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to cancel this one because I already have one.
And now you just.
And I took the other two.
All the information finished.
Yeah.
That's your database.
This is the method that I've created for the IB action. What I'm going to do is resign the first responder, which is going to be the keyboard.
Yeah.
But what we did with the calculator last week, was it just last week? I don't know. It felt like it was longer ago. Last week we did the calculator, and we did all the number buttons all wired together to one method, and all the operators to one method. They were doing the same thing. So now I'm going to switch over to the viewcontroller.m file. And I'm going to go down to the bottom where this brand new method has been added. No? Let's see. Where's the method? I'm going to find the method. Here it is right here. And I'm going to put one line of code in here. And the line of code is going to have an opening and a closing bracket. And inside the opening and closing bracket is going to be resign. You just start typing in resign. Oops. Resign first responder. Why am I not getting here? Let's see. Sender, excuse me, sender goes first, space, resign first responder. I have to remember Objective-C code. The object we're sending it to is the sender, and the method that we're sending it is to resign your first responder, please. And your first responder is the keyboard, because your sender is a text box, a text field. So if we put that in there, and I'm going to leave this up here for a few minutes because you can't copy and paste it from anywhere, you actually have to type it yourself. So sender is the object that's sending the message to the finished method, and it's connected to the method. So sender space resign first responder. If you just start typing it in, you can do the autocomplete. If you get that, then you got a working app. So let's try it out. So I'm going to run my app. First thing I'm going to do is test the keyboard, make sure I got my keyboard set correctly. So if I put a keyboard in here and I press done, and I put a keyboard in here and I press done, the done is got changed. The done is from the done event I put on the object. So now I have it done because the return is going to signal it done. But now if I just press return, it goes away too. So if I say Barbara, and I press return, because I return signal's done. And then I'm at 123 Sesame Street. I don't know how to spell sesame. Okay, street. And my number is 5551212. And now if I press save, it says contact added. So, and then everything went blank. So now I'm going to put in here Bob, because he's in every database. And Bob's in, he's at 122 Elm Street. And his phone number is 666-666. So he's got a bad number. And now he's added. So now I'm going to find something. I'm going to find Bob. If I find him, I see Bob's in here now. So now I'm going to click in me. And I'm going to find me. There I am. So we have a little database set up. Should be working actually. So if it's on a real device, which you'll be able to hook up next week if you want, then you can actually I can add another one in here. I'm going to put Mary in here. You can see after the app closes and you bring the app back up. In fact, I'll do that in a few minutes. 555-333 somewhere around. So if the app closes, oh, match not found when it's 0. So let's see, Mark. Oh, match not found either. But Bob's in here. Bob's in here. Match found. So if I were able to get out of this app, I'm trying to figure out how to get out of here. I didn't put an exit button here. Well, the next time I run it, let's just close the simulator then. And then I'm going to run the app again because it's installed on the simulator. My database is used on the simulator, so let's see what happens when I run it again. So I'm going to put in here a Bob. Oops, capital B. It is case sensitive, by the way. Oh, Bob's in there. So I closed the simulator because I couldn't figure out how to exit. I didn't put an exit button in the app or minimize or, you know, just go in the background. So I should have, did I put Mark in here? No. Nope, Mark's not in here, but Barbara's in here. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so my data's still there. So you can now create an app that stores data. You're probably not going to do this because you already have an address book, but let's say your app has properties where the user selects something and they've selected that they want this preference. Then the next time the user comes back, the user can log in. Actually, you can make a login. Put your name, put the password, and put a button that goes to the database. It says if you're in there, let them go in. If not, don't let them go in. And if they are in, then set their preferences the way they have them saved. And then you can add more fields to it. So at this point, though, you're going to need to know a little bit about SQL. so if you can do it anywhere else with SQL, you can do it on the iPhone with SQL. So it's SQL is SQL. It's the same language, actually. But I have had a lot of students take this app as a base. And I will post this finished app underneath the video just in case you couldn't get yours to work. Or you may also download the zip file and cut and paste the code from the zip file into the two methods if you're still having problems fixing the underscore problem. But you can use this sort of as a basis to build other apps that use database. All apps are going to look the same. They're all going to essentially connect the same way. They're all going to work the same way. And the technique we used in this one was on the view-did-load method. And the view-did-load method is doing all the work of checking to make sure that the database is actually there, and if not, create the database. And we're just putting it in the folder, document folder of the default user directory, which is open, by the way. So you get read-write access to it from your app. So if you're the user, you installed the app has read-write directory to that database. I also have another tutorial that shows you how to use files instead. So we can read and write files to the SD card as well. So that one's going to be the next one. So I'm going to stop this video because we're done with this one. And again, I'll post this finished. I just messed it up here. See? This nice, beautiful project, not so nice and beautiful, but I'll post this one next to the video. So.